why is it that we make our students live like adults, right? Why is it that we put them in a residence hall in the middle of a city? And then, when they get used to it, they spend 8 months in San Francisco, where they go through a process we call accelerated adulting, where they become adults very fast. And then, as soon as they get used to San Francisco, we say, okay, pack your bags, you're going to Seoul. And they're in Seoul in 4 months, and for any of them that don't have enough culture shock being there for 4 months, we then have them move to Hyderabad for 4 months to make sure that they're going to get culture shock. Right? And then as soon as they start being able to navigate Hyderabad, it's time to go to Berlin, and then Buenos Aires and London, etc. Right? Now, why is that? Because if these individuals are going to be called upon in their future to make decisions that will impact the lives of my children, they need to be ready. They need to understand what it means to apply critical wisdom in different contexts. They have to be able to transfer into contexts that are not familiar to them. They have to be able to think systemically. When universities, what university doesn't say we train people to be global? How are they being global? How is living on a campus with a few international students make anybody global? Right? But to actually understand how your day-to-day life, right, the basic assumptions you make are going to be different in different contexts, provides you the ability to understand how others conduct their lives and live. And so, as I said, Minerva is very much not for everyone, but there is a segment of the human population for which Minerva really should be the only choice. And that's what we're trying to get to with our little gem of a school.
Question at the back.
I'll keep this really brief. A lot of elite universities today are, caught up in this epidemic of political correctness, right?
Yeah.
You talk about your so-called peer institutions. They disinvite speakers. They, only allow democratic voices to be heard, for example, in the American context. My question is, how is Minerva Project or the Minerva University contributing to fighting this epidemic of political correctness? That's one. And the second question is, and I don't ask this in jest, right? What is the most serious and valid criticism you have heard since the Minerva Project, a university, started in 2012? Thanks.
Sure. So, two excellent questions. So, political correctness is a big sore point for me. Okay, so there are elements of political correctness is a very broad brush. I actually found myself once in an argument with somebody who said that political correctness has never done good for anyone. And I found myself in the odd position of defending political correctness, which I rarely do. But I think you can see some pretty dramatic positive impacts of certain types of political correctness. So if you want to really see any kind of stark example, go to YouTube and find an American 1980s era sitcom. Just look it up and watch a couple of episodes. And I am sure you would be taken aback by some of the things that, was in the popular culture. They're just really shockingly weird. Look at how African Americans are portrayed in some of those sitcoms. Look at how gay people are portrayed in some of those of sitcoms, etc. And political correctness has been able to renorm what is open and acceptable, right, in broader society, in my opinion, in good ways, in some good ways. Having said that, all good movements have negative downsides. And the difficulty, as you've said, is this monoculture of belief in what is correct and what is not. So I would say the habits and concepts are really about having rational thinking, there are, left of center Minervans, there are right of center Minervans, and our job is to prevent the extremes on both sides. But I'll give you a quick anecdote, which I think is illustrative. I was on a conference at some point, and there were a number of Minerva students there, and a few other students from other institutions. One of the conference participants came to me and said, "Oh, I have to talk to you because there's I love Minerva. I think what you're doing is amazing, but one of your students did something really, really bad." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He says, "Well, they were talking to somebody who's an expert in a field, and they, were providing their opinion, and the student basically said, 'That's a non-valid opinion. You can't possibly say that. You're not even allowed to talk that way.'" And I said, "Oh my God, that is terrible. Who was it? What was the name of the student?" And when they gave me the name, I said, "Oh, no, that's not a Minerva student, that's an Ivy League grad." And that person was an Ivy League graduate. I'll leave the school out of the context. Our educational system is about training people to observe different perspectives and evaluate them, right? Dispassionately, fighting the cognitive biases, fighting how they're anchored, fighting what is generally accepted. And one of the great privileges that we have is we have a wildly international student body with very different backgrounds. In every class, we have students from Israel, and we have students from throughout the Muslim world, right? And they need to understand how to discuss very sensitive topics, right, in a respectful but firm way, right? And that process, that ability to have those types of conversations is a necessity. You can't ignore it. You can't avoid it. And so the environment, we're lucky in that it's a real world testing ground for the habits and concepts that we teach them, right? And political correctness makes it difficult to survive in that type of environment. The second thing is when students will talk about, this could trigger people and all the rest, we're very blunt with them. The world is full of triggers, and you're here in the real world. This is not a bubble. This is not a place for you to be safe from ideas that you don't like. This is not a place for you to learn how to be less resilient rather than more resilient, right? And it's fundamental to our values. It's fundamental to our way of thinking. It's controversial, but that's just kind of how we are. As far as valid criticism, which we will admit, Minerva is, to our earlier conversation, hard. It is hard to the extent that truly the vast majority of people should not go to Minerva. It is extraordinarily demanding of your time, of your attention. I mean, so students will work on a Minerva curriculum roughly twice as hard as they would in a traditional Ivy League university. At the same time, they have to cook for themselves, right? There's no cafeteria. At the same time, more than 80% of our students work 10 hours a week during their studies because both we believe in real-world applications, but also as part of their financial aid package. They live with 150 of the most fascinating people in the world, right, that surround them all the time, that they want to spend time with. We provide dozens of co-curricular opportunities for them to integrate into the cities that they learn about and apply what they've learned through an integrated learning process. And then, by the way, they have 4 months to experience Seoul, right, or London. So it is an environment of extraordinary amounts of stimulation. And it's not right for the overwhelming majority of people. But like I said, there are those individuals that when presented with that opportunity completely thrive and grow, right? And that lack of universality is a feature, it's not a bug, but there is just criticism around it, which is, especially in our first year or two, we were not as adept at explaining to students what they're about to get into. And it's important to understand that, right? It's important that the right students apply for Minerva. It's important that the right students come to Minerva. But we are very much not a universal solution as the construction of the entity itself.
So I think we're coming to the end of this session, but Ben, if you had one wish for Minerva Project and university, what would that be?
The one wish is that we would spur action in others. And perhaps the greatest wish, the way I ended the book, was the best thing that could possibly happen is that another entity, could be a university, it could be a company, it could be a consortium, would develop a better educational system than we have. I would love to have a competitor, but we don't, right? And I think once competition arises, that others come up with systematic ways of providing education that can produce even better results than Minerva, that would be the best possible outcome for the world.
Thanks. So on that note, we'll close the formal part of our discussion, but feel free to stay back and come up to the front and ask us any questions. But let's put our hands together for Ben Nelson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.